Let's revise the phrase and the clause. What is the meaning of phrase? A phrase is a group of words without a subject-verb component used as a single part of speech. Means, in phrase, we will not have subject, we will not have verb, and it will not have its own meaning. It may be the part of a sentence, but on its own it will not be meaningful. This is known as phrase. Example: as fast as possible, will be running, in the kitchen, very quickly, at a good speed. See, all these following sentences are not meaningful. They don't have a proper subject and verb combination, and they are not making any sense unless and until we use these group of words in a sentence. It will not be meaningful. So, phrases are the part of sentences which will not have its own subject verb component, means it will not have the subject and verb combination, and it will not be meaningful. That is phrase. Okay. Now, how is phrase different from clause? Now, let us see what do we mean by clause. A clause is a group of related words containing a subject that tells readers what the sentence is about, and a verb that tells readers what the subject is doing. Means, a clause will have a subject-verb component. Then, it is the main basic difference between phrase and clause. Phrase does not have a subject-verb component, whereas clause has a subject and a verb. Now again, clauses are divided into two types, which are independent clause and dependent clause. Okay, so independent clause, as the name suggests, independent means it will not have to depend on anyone. It will have its own meaning. It can stand by its own. Again, I will say a clause has its own subject and a verb. So, one part of clause is independent clause. Independent clause is also known as main clause or principal clause. It is a clause that can stand on its own. It contains all the information necessary to be a complete sentence. An independent clause has a subject that tells you what the sentence is about, and a verb that tells you what the subject is doing. It expresses a complete thought, relying that something has happened or was said. So, in independent clause, there is obviously subject and verb, and it will make a complete sense. It is meaningful. So, independent clause can stand by its own. It's also known as main clause or principal clause. So, our next type is dependent clause. Dependent clause, okay, few examples of independent clause. My dog loves pizza crust. See, here we have subject, my dog. Here we have verb, loves, as well as we have the component which makes it a complete sentence. So, this is independent clause. Next, we visited Paris in September. Here also same, subject is there, verb is there. Hence, it is independent clause. I was late to work. Same, subject, verb is present. So, it acts as independent clause. The main thing is these sentences are meaningful and complete in itself. That's why we are saying it as independent clause. Okay, our next type is dependent clause. A dependent clause, again, as the name suggests, it will have to depend on something. So, dependent clause will depend on the independent clause to make the sentence complete. By its own, it will be incomplete. It will not be meaningful. It will only have to depend on the independent clause to get its complete meaning. A dependent clause is a group of words with a subject and a verb. Because it is clause, it will have a subject and a verb. It does not express a complete thought. So, it is not a sentence and can't stand alone. So, again, dependent clause will have a subject and verb, but it will not be meaningful. It will have to depend on the independent clause. How can we understand? Dependent clause is generally followed by a conjunction. Words like whatever, wherever, unless, and, so, but, if, all these words, the dependent clause will follow by these words. The conjunction, the subordinating conjunctions act as the joining of two clauses, independent clause and dependent clause. Let us see few examples. When the president arrives. See, if I consider this part, here subject is there, verb is there, but the part is not complete. How can we make it complete? We will have to add some more sentences, some more words in front of when or after arrives. Then only it will become complete. Means here the main clause is missing. That's why our sentence is not complete. Though the subject is there and verb is there, but it is not complete. Next, because I can't wait for the bus. Again, subject is there, verb is there. Then also the sentence is not complete. It will have to depend on an independent clause to get its complete meaning. As if he knew what was going to happen. Again, the sentence is not complete. So, now see the words when, because, as if. All these words are acting as a conjunction which will have to join with the independent clause. So, the conjunctions or the subordinating conjunctions are joining the main clause or independent clause with the dependent clause. Dependent clause is also known as subordinating clause. Okay, because its importance is less than the main clause. That's why main clause is known as principal clause and dependent clause is known as subordinate clause. Okay. So now we will solve few questions. Let us recap again. Phrase, it will not have subject verb component and it will not have a complete meaning. Clause, clauses will have subject and verb. Independent clause will be complete, whereas dependent clause, though it will have a subject and verb, it will not be complete. It will have one conjunction and it depends on the main clause to be complete. Okay, now let us solve few questions. See, identify the following sentences as phrase and clause. Means we will have to say whether the sentence is phrase or clause. From the stairs. See, from the stairs, no subject is there, no verb is there, and it is incomplete. Obviously, it is phrase. Second question, the play was funny. We can see subject is there, we can see verb is there, and also our sentence is complete. So by seeing the subject and verb, we can come to the conclusion that it is clause. Now here our sentence is complete. We can say this as main clause. Next, I took the dog to the park. Again in this sentence, subject is there, verb is there. So it is clause and the sentence is fully complete. So we can say it is main clause. My favorite grocery store. Proper subject and verb component is not matching. So we can say it is phrase. Leaving behind the dog. Again, no proper subject and verb component. So we can come to the conclusion that it is a phrase. Because she smiled at him. Subject is there, verb is there. We can say it is clause. Now see, the sentence starts with because. So, which clause it will be? It will be dependent clause because the sentence in itself is not complete. It is starting with because and it doesn't have its complete sense. So, it is dependent clause. Okay. Now, we will do more questions. We will have to underline the main clause. First question. Although it was raining, Maria went for a jog at Civitan Park. Now see, the sentence is starting with although. So if I consider the first part of the sentence, although it was raining, so we can't say that this part is complete. But when I say the next part, Maria went for a jog at Civitan Park, we can say now the sentence is complete. Now see the second part. Maria went for a jog at Civitan Park. This part of the sentence is complete in itself. It has subject, it has verb. So, this part is main clause. And although it was raining, it is dependent clause or subordinate clause. When you finish your homework, please take the dog for a walk. Okay, so if I take the first part of the sentence, when you finish your homework, does it make any sense? No, it is not meaningful. But if I say the whole sentence, when you finish your homework, please take the dog for a walk, only then it will become meaningful. So, the first part, when you finish your homework, this is dependent clause. And see the word when it acts as a conjunction. So, our main clause here is please take the dog for a walk. Now, if I segregate this part of the sentence, please take the dog for a walk, it has a complete sense. So, we can say that this part is the main clause. Okay. Juan continued playing although he injured his knees. Here, what is the conjunction used? Although. If I say although he injured his knees, it will not be complete. it will have to depend on the first part of the sentence. Juan continued playing. So, here our main clause is Juan continued playing, and our subordinate clause is although he injured his knees. While I was scrubbing the floors, Juliet was watching television. See the first part of the sentence? While I was scrubbing the floors. This part is not complete in itself, but the full part, while I was scrubbing the floors, Juliet was watching television. This is complete in itself. So, the second part, Juliet was watching television. This part is meaningful. This has its own meaning. It can stand by its own. So, this is the main clause. Okay? I hope you will understand now the difference between the main clause and dependent clause. After the flood, the family moved into a temporary shelter. Again here the conjunction is after. So if I say only after the flood, it will not be meaningful. It will not have a proper sense. But if I take the remaining portion, the family moved into a temporary shelter, then it will have a complete sense. It will become meaningful. So, here the family moved into a temporary shelter. This part is complete and meaningful. So, this part can be used as main clause, and after the flood is dependent clause. Okay. So, the basic difference between phrase and clause. Phrase will not have subject and verb combination, and hence it will not have a proper meaning. Whereas clause will have both the subject and the verb combination. Now, two parts of clause, independent and dependent. Independent clause will have its complete meaning. It will be able to stand by its own. Whereas dependent clause, though it will have subject and verb, it will not have complete meaning. And there will be one conjunction in the dependent clause. Dependent clause will have to depend on the independent clause for its complete sense. That's all for phrase and clause. Thank you. Take care.